Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Rock Experience with Mike Brunn. On this episode, I have with me Vincent LaRussa, and we will talk all about if we think it's possible that Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons thought about bringing Vinnie Vincent back into the band in 1991 during the Revenge sessions. Again, the key part of this is not whether or not we think he should or shouldn't have been brought back, but whether or not Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons actually gave it even a second's worth of thought. We think you guys will find this conversation very interesting, and I know you guys will have a lot of opinions about it. So let's jump in and let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of the Rock Experience with Mike Brunn. On this episode, I am excited to have back with me my buddy, the chemist, Mr. Vincent LaRussa. How you doing, buddy?
Good, good. I love these impromptu, like, do you want to do this discussion on whatever it's going to be? And I don't even have time to think about it.
I like to do that too. I like to do that too. You know, I was thinking about it the other day. I know we did the episode, me, you, and Mario, about Kiss Live 3. We did that about a month ago at this point. But you and I, just doing a show like this, it's been around 2 months. So I think we were long overdue.
You shouldn't remind me of these things. You know, I have a laundry list of things that I'd like to discuss with you. And I know you're a busy man when you're talking to the likes of Paul Stanley and, whomever, Paul Stanley. And
Paul Stanley. And
Paul Stanley.
I just talk to Paul Stanley every week, right?
Right.
That wouldn't be too bad, but I have a feeling he's not looking to talk to me every week.
Make it bi-weekly.
Maybe, yeah. But, I messaged you the other day, and I was like, you know what? Last week I did the Vinnie Vincent interview. I was at his May Metal Madness party, and it was funny. Just a little backstory for a moment here. After I did the interview, I'm done. I wrapped up. I'm talking to a couple of people in the room. And one of the guys, Brian, great guy. Brian, if you're watching, great to see you at the party. And he comes up to me. You know Brian, yeah. Right.
Didn't he ask about me?
Yes, he did. So, but notice I'm the only one that said hello.
Hey, what's up, Brian?
Okay, good. There you go. Now you got two hellos to Brian in case he's watching. But he came up to me afterwards and he was like, Mike, I got you a headline from your interview. I'm like, what's that? He's like, Blabbermouth is going to say, Vinnie Vincent thought he could be back in Kiss in 1991. I was like, interesting, right? So to me, the interview I did with him covered a whole spectrum of topics. And, for those who maybe haven't seen it yet, it's up to about 20,000 views. So first, I'll just say thank you to everybody.
That happened.
Yeah, it just happened like,
Over the weekend when I saw you, it was like 8,000, was it 8 or 9,000?
Yeah, wow. It's really, people are continuing to take off. I will say, I knew the audio was slightly echoey. A few people have made comments about that. I'm looking and seeing if I could kind of remaster the audio and repost it.
I've given you a couple of tips on that one.
Yes, you have. You've given me a few tips. So we'll see. I'm not making any promises, but maybe that'll be a little bonus, little treat for people. I'll re-up it with some better audio. But the point being, when I did the interview, Brian did come up to me and said, hey, I think that your headline is going to be Vinnie Vincent thinks he could be back in Kiss in 1991. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Let's see what happens. And then lo and behold, this past weekend, Blabbermouth ran a story, headline, pretty much word for word. Vinnie Vincent thinks it was possible to be back in Kiss in 1991. And I was like, that's a good topic to discuss because you kind of go back and forth on this a lot. And, I'll say this, before we even debate whether or not we think that's possible or not, I'm just going to read off the quote, right? Because I don't want people to say, Vinnie Vincent's nuts. He thought he was going to be in Kiss. I want to make sure people have the context of the quote properly, right?
Go ahead.
Vinnie Vincent said, I think, And then he even paused. He goes, those are the key words. I think, not I'm saying, but I think there was a moment where it could have happened, where I could have been back in the band. Then he goes on to say, but this is only my opinion. Don't take it as somebody else's opinion. It's just my opinion. Right. So he wasn't like he was saying, yes, I thought I was going to be in, it wasn't like, it was just more so like, as he reflected on it, that's what he thought. And I know when I interviewed him, I paused for a moment. I thought to myself, wow, that's interesting. I never really thought in my mind that he'd be back in the band in 1991, but I've given it a lot of thought since then. So before I keep blabbering, just that comment in general, what were your initial thoughts when you heard that he said that?
I guess I was a little surprised, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think back before Revenge came out, and you're much better at this stuff. Was there 411 that he was writing with them at the time? Was that like a known thing, or okay?
Yeah, I don't remember that part of it. Yes,
yeah,
I do remember knowing about
that part of it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, yep. I probably, if you knew about it, you told me about it at the time, but I just don't have that recollection of it.
Right. We're talking 20 years ago, so
yeah,
most memories fade, right?
Yeah, but no, I guess I was really surprised to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
More so because it just seemed like life with Bruce was good,
Right.
But I think we're going to get into discussion. Life with Bruce also produced certain songs that.
Yep.
I mean, I don't think this is going to be a debate between you and I, aren't up to the standards of which, no disrespect to Bruce, but Vinnie's writing with Kiss,
right.
stands on its own, right?
Right.
So,
yeah. And I'll say this, when Vinnie first made the comment and I was sitting next to him that day, I was like, that was never going to happen. Even though I knew in 91 that he was writing with them, in my mind, he was writing, that's it. And I was like, that was never going to happen. But then I said to myself, well, I'm going to take a critical thought process on this. And I don't want to think about it with the thought process of 2021. I want to probably try to put my mindset back into 1991.
And 55 lawsuits later.
And 55, well, but that's important, right? Because,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you said that, because, if we look at it in 2021, it's very easy to say, no way that was ever going to happen, right? Because we know about the lawsuits. We know about that Vinnie went pretty much missing for 20 years. We know that Paul and Bruce are still very good friends. So it's very easy in 2021 to say, not a chance in the world, right? Which is where my mind started when Vinnie made the comment. But I said, take my mind out of 2021, remove the things I know from the last 20 years and put me back in 1990, 91. And now do I think it's possible? And I sat there and I said,
And I know you probably did do that too.
I probably did. I think I was. I was like, Actually, I think I was sitting in my pool, floating around, saying,
yeah.
But, I'll just give some background and then I'd like to get your thoughts on this, right? So again, if we think back to that time period, let's go back even a few years prior. Crazy Nights was released. We know that they waited for Ron Nevison. We did a great podcast episode about that album, right? So you go check that one out if you haven't seen it yet, right? But we also know that album was not the huge success that the band hoped it was, right? And when they toured, it wasn't this huge success of a tour the way they were really hoping it was. It did well. I think it went platinum eventually. Yes, I said platinum, right? Because that's the way you and I as jerks say it, right? But it wasn't a huge hit the way they hoped it would be. Not the way Ozzy's album was and Heart, right? Which is what they were really hoping for, like that type of multi-platinum success. Then Hot in the Shade comes out. Hot in the Shade, they had to wait 4 or 5 months until they even toured for it because there was very little interest from the
promoters.
Thank you. I was like, not the publicists, the promoters, right?
Yeah.
They even at that time were discussing, do they get Ace Frehley to open up for them and come out and do encores as a selling point for the tour? Point being, the band was, not selling out arenas and setting the world on fire. Yes, Forever became a hit, but even still, they needed Faster Pussycat, Winger, Slaughter to be on that tour with them. Great tour, one of my favorite all-time Kiss tours, right? But my point is, they weren't this multi-platinum selling band that was selling out arenas around the world. And I think Paul and Gene, especially at that moment, might have been a little bit like, what's going on? Why can't we obtain, again, the success of the Motley Crues, the Rats, the Guns N' Roses, etc., Bon Jovi? Why can't we be back at that level? So my point in bringing all that up is I don't think they were 100% happy with where the band was in 1990. again, it's not to say that ultimately that we're going to reach the conclusion that Vinny was going to be back in, but I don't think they were as ecstatic about the band in 1990 as they were hoping to be. So let me pause there because I just said a ton of stuff. What do you think about all that?
Well, I want to say, like, our perspective of being in New York, I think we were looking at it through a different lens. I think, we've come to find out now that we would go to the Garden or the Nassau Coliseum, or at that time was the Brendan Byrne Arena, which was in New Jersey, and they'd be sold out shows. But however, I only found out recently, and you actually told me some of the stuff, there were certain cities where, how much were they selling? 5,000-6,000 seats,
5,000 seats, yep.
Yeah. So we had this perception, all right, the band always sold itself as like gold, platinum status, and you kind of would read about these things. And at the time too, they were putting out Kiss Exposed, Crazy Nights video, all those different, they were putting out a lot of like promotional things, or, things to help support the band at the time. Looked like things were kind of going really well for the band.
Yep.
But, now thinking about it, like you said, through a totally different, looking back, I could see why this kind of makes a lot of sense that, okay, the band wasn't doing as well. They didn't have like the Dr. Feelgoods coming out. They didn't have the Welcome to the Jungles. They didn't have, even the Skid Rows at the time were doing much better than Kiss was, as far as like multiple hits. They would have 2 or 3 hits per record. Right. The Cinderellas, even, you could debate, said could have had a little bit more, success as far as radio or MTV. I mean, when and by the time Cinderella came out with their Long Cold Winter, which I love that album, Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone was a huge MTV hit for the band. And I don't think it reached quite the number 8 I think that Forever got to, but I mean, Timeline into Hot in the Shade, that was kind of far in, wasn't it? That was the second single. And as you said, they had already waited however many months before they even started the tour. So the perception is like, wow, Kiss hasn't had a hit like this since, I Was Made for Loving You, Exactly. So a radio hit, because I think I Was Made for Loving You broke the top 10, if I not mistaken on that one.
Yep, so, I think you're right. Yep.
So they hadn't had a top 10 hit since then. So, yeah, we know how competitive Gene and Paul were. I mean, clearly, there was certain songs like, whether it was like Read My Body or something, like they were trying to do like a Def Leppard type of thing, here in the production, here in the sound, it was just very bad versions of them, in my opinion, those songs have not aged well, in my opinion. Right. I'm sure I'll get blasted, in the comments, but, yeah. So,
I agree with you, at least.
Yeah, so I agree with you. It's, it makes more sense now that maybe the band was kind of saying, all right, some years have passed with Vinny. Yeah, we had a couple, whatever, however it ended at that time. Yet hadn't gone through the second round of the stuff that went on where it really seemed to get really bad. We know we have success. I Love It Loud, Lick It Up, I Still Love You. We could, I mean, we could just go on and on.
But I think I'm going to pause you there for a moment. I think that's an important part of this, right? Those 3 songs were staples of the 80s concert set list, right?
Yeah.
So, somewhere in the back of their mind was, hey, those songs we wrote with Vinny have stood the test of time, at least for them in the 80s, right?
Yes, and let's also think about it. For the songs, The Tears Are Falling, the Who Wants to Be Lonely, the Heaven's on Fire, all those songs pretty much had co-writers, who influenced those songs. So I think for whatever reason it was, whether, and I think we've come to know that Paul's very involved in the songwriting process. You've had Desmond Child on, and it's just like Paul was to say, oh, what do you got? Oh, that's great. Let's go with that. He was very active, but sometimes it's just a formula. And like, okay, we did this in the 70s. Gene and I wrote together, but, we know that Gene was doing his movie thing and his Miami Vice and every other thing that he was trying to get involved in. And we all know the history. Paul was running the band and all that. So, bringing outside writers, trying to be competitive with the time, it also kind of makes sense that previous to getting together with Vinny, they were kind of doing a lot of that with Juan Beauvoir, however you pronounce his name. And like I said, Desmond and some other writers. So
yeah. And the other part that I think about with this, again, because look, I love Bruce in the band. I love that Bruce carries the torch of the 80s stuff. But if I just look at it very objectively, again, trying to think of it from Paul and Gene's point of view. So they had their previous guitarist. You just rattled off some of the songs they wrote with him, right? Which have stood the test of time. And now we're looking at, let's just say, the Hot in the Shade album. And the Bruce Kulick co-writes was Prisoner of Love and Boomerang. neither of which we're going to say even going to crack the top 100. And you know my thoughts on Boomerang might be one of the worst songs I've ever heard in my life, right? Again, no knock on Bruce. Love Bruce, but the song Boomerang is not one of my favorites. In fact, if you look at the Hot in the Shade album, I find this very fascinating. There are just as many co-writes from the current Kiss guitarist as there was from Bruce Kulick on that album. Tommy Thayer.
Say that again?
Tommy Thayer has two co-writes.
Yeah.
The current Kiss guitarist actually had just as many co-writes on that album as Bruce Kulick did. So
interesting.
My point being, for whatever reason, I think they loved Bruce in the band, but as I look at it now, I don't know if they really gelled with Bruce as a songwriter, because when they were writing with him, you were getting Prisoner of Love.
Well, let's also remind ourselves, too, that after Vinnie left Kiss, or whatever the reasons why he wasn't in Kiss, contract not, extended, whatever, he came out with 2 albums. I guess the band had to say, okay, all right, we come to know now that this didn't work out. However, if you're an objective listener, you listen to those records. I particularly like the second better than the first. He still had it. He still was writing some great stuff. And okay, so he had built even more his songwriting prowess. I think he even had a songwriting credit on one of the Bangles albums when they had that hit with Eternal Flame. I think Vinnie has the songwriting credit.
I think you're right. Now that you say that, I forgot about that. I have to go back and double check. Yeah, I think you're right though.
Next time you ask him about that, and remember, I'm the one who reminded you. Hold on. This message is sponsored by White Castle.
That's great. Smooth.
The fact I'm able to do this podcast after eating that shows how good my stomach is.
And
it was joyous.
And it was joyous. That's good. I'm still waiting for my dinner, but that's okay.
Right.
But you know what? Again, putting ourselves back in that timeline, it's easy to say, well, what Bruce did on Revenge is incredible. And I love his guitar playing on Revenge. And he certainly wrote a lot of songs on the follow-up album, Carnival of Souls, which I know you love, and that'll have to be another whole topic for another day, right?
I keep waiting for that one.
And we'll do it. I promise.
Waiting.
Sounds familiar.
Keep me waiting.
I sang that to you a little earlier.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny, right? But that stuff hadn't happened yet, so we can't enter that into this equation if we're going to sit here pretending it's 1990, 91. The more I thought about it, the more I said what seemed like it was absolutely impossible. No way that would have ever been a consideration. I had to sit there and say, I can't rule it out. I can't rule out that Paul and Gene, especially Gene, maybe, that it didn't cross his mind that, hey, we wrote some really good songs with this guy. If we're writing with him again and things are going well, maybe we give it another shot.
Yeah. And by all accounts, from what we've heard, the writing sessions for that record were really good, and the communications were really solid, and it really seemed like a team effort. And again, look at the songs that Vinnie co-wrote on that album, and you can arguably say they're the best songs on the album, right?
Oh yeah, look, it was Unholy, the lead single, I Just Wanna, the second or third single, whatever it was, right? And then Heart of Chrome as well, which wasn't a single, but it's a solid song. So, but it's 2 of the singles from the album where Vinnie co-writes.
Yeah, and I guess we could debate, or maybe not debate, is Unholy the best song that Kiss has produced since then? I know you're a fan of Monster, and I know how high you rank that up, but is there a song on Monster that you feel is better than Unholy?
That's obviously I'm giving this a lot of thought. I'm not just answering you right away. It's funny because I love Unholy. Great song. I sometimes get tainted with it because it live just never translated as well. And we spoke about that on the live 3, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to separate that. Don't
go there.
Exactly.
Don't go. I was created by man. You got to go. Where he's really belting out that that chorus. What made that song so great, by the way, too, is that damn video.
The video was incredible. The video was incredible. So, I remember seeing it for the first time. Is there another song better since then? There's 1 or 2 songs maybe on Monster that I will say would be in contention, but I can sit here and debate that back and forth even with myself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll say so. Point being, what I said is a pretty good point to make. That that again, Vinnie gets a co-write on maybe their best song that they wrote in the last 20 plus years. So what is it, 20 years?
20 years.
Was it 30?
No,
My math.
yeah, 30 years. Wow. I think I said 20 before, but it's 30
You did
years.
say 20. That's why
God
we said 20. I'm like,
damn.
yeah, I know.
God damn.
Yeah.
Uh,
No,
no, you just depressed me. 30
I'm
years.
sorry. I'm
Oh man.
sorry.
No, but you're right. It's been, pretty much 30 years. And you can make a case that's been the best song in the last 30 years. So go ahead. Were you gonna say something?
No. I was just taking the onions out of my teeth.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. I'm glad we know that. All righty. And this is not for me sitting here. This is not about the onions. No, this is not about being all pro Vinny, but this is about trying to put my mindset, which again, when he made the comments, my first thought was that was never happening. Never. Bruce was the guy. They loved Bruce. But when I started to try to think about it critically, again, with the mindset of Paul and Gene, I said, 1990, 1991. Keep in mind also, Bruce wasn't the first guy they thought of to replace Vinnie Vincent. So it's not like they said, oh, Ace Frehley left the band, we got to get this guy Bruce in. They went through a couple of other guys before they went to Bruce. And I said to myself, I know it seemed crazy when he first said it, but maybe there was something to it at that time. Maybe. I don't know.
Look, he was spending a significant amount of time with them. He might have been picking up a really good, like, collaborative vibe. Maybe certain things were uttered here and there. Not, he's made it clear, said, this is how I feel.
Right.
It's not like something was said. This is what
Right.
I feel.
Right.
So I'm not saying that Paul or Gene hinted at something, but just the way you just feel like things are going, like, wait, maybe this could happen again.
Yeah. And, that to me, coming out of that interview, that was a thing that I learned. I just always assumed Vinny was there for maybe 2 weeks, wrote a couple songs with them, and then he was gone. He claimed it was 2 years. I have a feeling his timeline might have been off a little bit because he said it was like from late 89 through 91. And we know in 1990 they were on tour the whole time, right? So it's a little hard pressed to think that he was touring with them writing, right? But the tour only ran from like May to November. So, even if it was a year, right? Let's just cut it in half and say it was a year. I didn't realize that he was writing with them that much. And he said that he'd written with Paul and Gene a total of 9 songs. And he mentioned one of them during the interview. And, there could have been more songs with Vinny on that album if they so chose. Put it to you that way.
I think an interesting perspective, and somebody you got to get on your show, is to get Bob Ezrin on, because I don't know if he would even talk about it, but, Bob was obviously very actively involved with writing, and obviously the producer of the record, to kind of get his perspective of what he was seeing,
Yeah.
If there really was this camaraderie with the three of them, or whether 3 of them being, Bob, Paul, and Vinny, or Bob, Gene and Vinny, or even all 4 of them in the room. I know you had asked him about if he was at some of the sessions during the recording, and I forgot how he goes, yeah, I think what he said, I had to have been, I may have been, or
Yeah, he was a little elusive on that, but he was not elusive that it was him, Paul, and Bob Ezrin in a room together, right, in Heart of Chrome. So it's not like it was like him and Paul, and then Ezrin just added some pieces to it. Think about that. Vinny was in the room with the producer of Revenge writing songs. I find that fascinating. I find that fascinating.
Yeah. Well, again, we know Bob's history, whether he's working with Kiss, Pink Floyd, whoever. He's very active working with that artist, Alice Cooper.
Yep.
So, and for the most part, Bob's influence on any given song, if you look at his songwriting credits, is always something very, very positive.
Yep. Agreed. Now, saying all of this, by no means, I don't want people to misread what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting that I wish Vinnie Vincent was on the album instead of Bruce, because I happen to think Bruce's playing on the album is incredible. And I actually credit the band. I credit Bruce. I credit Bob for bringing that out in Bruce, right? I'm not suggesting that that's Vinny's playing on the album. I'm not suggesting Vinny would have played things better. In fact, I said this in my Facebook post that I made about the party. Vinny actually played I Just Wanna. And it was cool kind of hearing him play that during his party and do a different guitar solo than what we used to, and what it would have been like if Vinny was on the album. And I said it on my post. I personally think I liked Bruce's solo better, right? It was a little bit more tasty. I've lived with it also for 30 years, not 20, 30 years. So in fairness, that is the solo I'm used to. But I love Bruce's playing on the album. I'm never sitting there saying, gee, I wish Vinnie was on the album instead of Bruce. Quite the opposite. I think Bruce was the perfect guy for that album, for those songs. I think he really nailed it.
Yeah, look, me, I'm still always a big fan of Bruce, and I think I had told you more so recently that I went and listened to Crazy Nights, and it was like song after song. I felt like the solos were like always kind of very similar. You got to remember at that time, like what these guys were trying to do, and I think something like what Vinny might have done that night when you saw him and played, it could have just been his bag of tricks for the moment. I don't know if he sat there and really sat down and did a thought out, solo. Maybe he did. I don't know. But it's a fair point. You've listened to something for not 20, 30 years, and there are certain things that Bruce has done really, really well. Like we've said, the solo on Tears Are Falling is tremendous, or the solo on Forever is tremendous. He's done some really, really like signature things with Kiss, and who knows what that would have been like if Vinny would have been in the band. I mean, just look at like the first Vinny album and Back on the Streets, and you're like, you're ready for this like really cool. I've heard the other demo versions of that where Vinny lays out, and for those who love his shredding, they're not going to agree with me, but I like some of the original stuff that I heard where he just really played a melodic, because I think that's what that song needed. But the thing that he put on the final album is just like, it's just craziness. But in my opinion,
no, and look, it's interesting to me to think about. I mean, people know that the Boys Gonna Rock demo was an early version of On the Eighth Day, so that song might have morphed in. Boys Gonna Rock might have morphed into a Kiss song eventually. And Shoot You Full of Love was written during the Lick It Up era. So maybe not the lyrics, but the music was written during the Lick It Up era. So that could have been as well a song on Animalize, right? So look, we could sit here and debate that for forever, what Kiss would have been like had Vinny stayed around, or if they still wanted him to be around, so would have been very different, I think, the 80s.
Well, even if the 90s, if he all right, so let's think about what happened after that. If he would have stayed, if he would have gotten back at Kiss for revenge, okay, you knew it was inevitable that they wouldn't have the reunion. Vinny wasn't going to influence that either way. That was probably going to happen, right?
Yep.
Now, if after that you have Carnival of Souls, now Bruce was a huge contributor to that record and that sound, and all that drop D tuning stuff and what they were trying to capture for that era. When you think about Vinny and what he does, you don't think of him playing in that kind of style. So maybe again, debate for another day. Maybe that record wouldn't have been, for me, as good as if Vinny wrote it. Who knows? We can't answer that. For those people who love that album, they probably would agree with me and say, Bruce really gave a lot, not just in his guitar playing, but he played a lot of bass on that record. So
and you have me thinking now. Pretend Vinny did get back in the band in 91, 92. Even the whole 95 acoustic shows that they were doing. I think Bruce was the right guy for those shows. That's not to say Vinny can't play acoustic guitar. We've seen him. We know he can. But I think Bruce was the right guy for those things. He really nailed those performances. And I love, and we spoke about this before, I love MTV Unplugged. Is one of my all-time favorite Kiss albums, live or otherwise. I can't imagine anybody else other than Bruce being on that album with them, right? Because I think Bruce nailed it. So to your point, you change one thing, you change a few things leading up to the reunion, no doubt about it.
Yeah. But it's just that thing that once you know something, it's hard to think otherwise. You could say that about Unplugged, then if Bruce didn't exist and on that, and maybe Vinny made a stellar appearance on that, we would never think that. No,
very true.
It's really hard to say. We only know what we have.
Agreed.
But it's really easy to look back and make some of these statements and without no real evidence. If there was a different, it's impossible to put that out there.
Very true. And that's the purpose of this, was not to debate should he have been in the band or not, right? I'm not suggesting he should have or shouldn't have. They should have let Bruce go. They should have brought Vinny back. I'm not debating that at all. My only point in what I wanted to discuss is I never even thought it was a possibility until I really started to think about the timeline. Then I said, I can't say with 100% certainty that the thought never crossed Gene's mind or Paul's mind. And I'm curious, as we laid out some of this and some of the lack of success that they had with Crazy Nights, and then some of the lack of success they had with Hot in the Shade, the fact they had to bring in other touring bands with them. I'm wondering, as people listen to this, if they could think like I did, hey, maybe it's possible. It's not to say Vinnie Vincent was going to turn him into a 5 million, album sale type of band again, because he didn't do that the first time around. But could they have thought, hey, we wrote Lick It Up, we've written I Love It Loud, we've got this great new song Unholy, we got this song I Just Want It, we've got a connection with this guy. Maybe that's a better road. I'm curious to see what other people think, if they think that Paul and Gene might have for a split second thought that.
Yeah. It might just be that, a split second, with Gene and Paul. Who knows?
Yeah, it might have been just a split second, but I never, until this last week, thought that could have even been a split second thought on their side. And then as I thought about it and hearing Vinny's point of view, I'm like, I wonder. We'll never know the truth. We'll never, ever know the truth.
I think the one thing that we do know is that, Gene and Paul like to control their empire. And Vinny is not that kind of controllable type. He likes to work by his own rules.
Yes.
So that's why I think it's probably in the end, look, bottom line is success, right? It's what they always say. What's the bottom line? If the record company starts making statements like, listen, guys, you're not producing the hits. We don't know your contract. I don't know at that time, and you may know, like, by the time they were finished with Hot in the Shade, what was their album contract? Did they have another album too? Like, what was
they had? I think they had just signed either right before Hot in the Shade or I think it was right after Hot in the Shade. No, maybe right before. I think right before they had signed a new contract for like 6 albums or something like that, coming off the heels of Crazy Nights and then Asylum before that. Again, both of which went platinum. So I'm not trying to minimize that they didn't have some success, but I think especially Paul, always compared himself to the other bands of the 80s.
Of course.
The Motley Crues, the Poisons, the Bon Jovis, and that's why he followed the trends, whether it's Crazy Nights or whatever it is, right? Even to me, you mentioned before Cinderella, Rise to It, to me was a Cinderella ripoff, that whole intro. I remember hearing that start and I'm like, oh, this is Long Cold Winter. This is Cinderella sounding to me, Paul was always chasing that. So I don't think he was ever fully satisfied in the 80s.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating for me to think about. Again, I'm not suggesting that I thought it was going to happen. I'm not suggesting that it should have happened, but it's a very fascinating thing to think about if it was possible. And you said it great. What would have happened afterwards? There would have been a reunion, but what would have changed afterwards? It's a fascinating thought process.
Yeah, no, I agree 1,000%.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other bands I know of that brought an ex-member back only to write with them and then say, okay, thank you, and move along. I'm sure somebody watching this could come up with an example. I'm curious. Anybody watching, if you know of another example where an ex-member came back to write with the band that they had recorded a few albums with and then just, went on their merry way again.
Yeah, I can't off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't know any scenarios like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, interesting. All interesting to think about. That's it. It was just something that, came off of this headline, came off my interview that I never thought about before. And I think it's an interesting topic. I'm pretty certain 95% of the comments, if not more, will be, no way. There's no way Vinny was getting back in. Bruce was the guy. And I get that. And I'm not even suggesting that that's wrong. But I just challenge everybody. Don't think with your 2021 brain. Think with your 1991 brain. And think about some of the successes or lack thereof the band had, and then ask yourself if you think it's possible. If the answer is still no, that's cool. I can live with that, because I might even sometimes think the answer is no. But that's my challenge to everybody. Think like it's 1991.
Right. And party like it's 1999.
Absolutely. Oh man, that's a whole different band. It's a whole different artist, I should say. Not even band, whole different artist.
Still appropriate.
Good song. Oh, you know what? So I'm going to totally derail us now, right? Because I like to do this sometimes. So you mentioned Prince, and I'm thinking about how I saw Prince in 1985 on the Purple Rain tour. So that was kind of cool that I got to see that. And I don't know if you saw my Facebook post today, but do you know what I was doing 36 years ago, right? Probably pretty much this moment.
Don't know. I didn't see your post.
I was at Radio City at a Madonna concert. How about that?
Oh. Yeah. I was not. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I remember you going. I remember you going.
Yep.
I remember you going.
It was the Like a Virgin tour, and in the 80s I was into the hard rock, but I was into a lot of pop music also. Like I said, I saw Prince, I saw Madonna. So Yeah, 36 years ago at this moment, I was probably watching the Beastie Boys getting booed off the stage because the Madonna fans did not like them at all. And they had no hits yet. So nobody knew who they were.
Incredible, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's incredible. And then, a year and a half later, everybody was like, well, Madonna was right. They were actually pretty good, but nobody cared in July of 85. Nobody cared at all about them one way or another.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of useless information that nobody cared about it. They're like, how do you go from talking about Revenge to talking about the Like a Virgin album? But that's what we do
Some
here.
people might have disconnected right now, but for those who did, thank you for sticking with us.
Exactly.
I personally have no problem with that. I was also a fan. I didn't go to see her live, but
Yep. No, I liked her back then. I don't like her now. I don't like her newest stuff at all. But at that time, you remember I had some of the posters in my room, but that's a whole nother topic for another whole day. I had my Kiss poster, my Madonna poster side by side. So
I remember.
Yeah, but anyway, all right, we're totally off track here, but that's okay. That's all cool. I guess my comment to everybody out there, again, like it's 1991. What do you think? Do you think there was even a sliver of a chance that Vinny was going to get back in? We'd love to hear your thoughts. We'd love to hear your comments. And I think that's a wrap for this one, buddy.
Sounds like it to me.
All righty. Well, then on that note, double Ringo. We out.
Double Ringo.
All righty. Later, everybody. All righty. There you have it. We'd like to hear your thoughts and your comments about whether or not you think, even for one fleeting moment, Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons actually contemplated bringing Vinnie Vincent back into the band around 1991. Again, try to put your mindset as if it is 1991 and keep out of your mind all the things that we know about the last 25, 30 years. I'm looking forward to hearing all of your comments and your thoughts on this topic. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. If you're listening to one of my podcasts, subscribe over there as well. Also, head on over to Facebook and follow my page, The Rock Experience with Mike Brunn, where each and every day we talk about all the rock and roll music that you love. You should also follow me on Instagram and Twitter as well. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. See you all next time.